Tell us when we're okay. We're good. Okay. Okay, let me get. Okay, let's proceed. We are back. Thank you very much. And we are back with item number 39, 53 Gore Vale Avenue. On this application, panel is looking at a copy of the draft plan of survey and other material submitted by the applicant. We have commenting reports from Transportation Services and a staff report from Engineering and Construction and another from Urban Forestry. There is correspondence in support in the form of a 6-signature petition signed by the owners or occupants of 73, 45, 47, and 87 Gore Vale, and another 43 and a letter from 43 Gore Vale, received 29 June. In opposition, we have a letter from Carolyn Wong at 50 Bellwoods Ave, received 28 June. And we have received on the 2nd of July a planning opinion letter prepared by David Riley, the agent. So, let's go to the agent now and ask the agent to join us by stating your name.
Hi there, it's David Riley here from SGL Planning and Design.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm just going to check with the panel members on this application, which is a consent application with 2 minor variance applications attached. Panel, would you profit from a presentation in this case, or do you have questions for the applicant? No, Ms. Hayes, go ahead.
I don't need a presentation. I do just have a couple of questions.
Please proceed.
So with respect to the minimum lot area, I do notice, other similar types of built forms in the area, but are any of those lot areas the smallest of what you're looking for in terms of the conveyed lot?
No, in terms of the conveyed lot, it's actually consistent with, if you look south of the subject property on the block,
Yeah.
There are some variation in terms of where that dividing line is between the home on Bellwoods and the home on Gore Vale. So there's certainly other examples. And of course, the home that was that's proposed for the severed property off of Bellwoods has been designed in accordance with where we're proposing that property line, which is actually, it creates a house that's less deep than the house that it is adjacent to the south, and it just provides for kind of a balanced rear yard on both properties.
Okay. One other question. I know that this area certainly has homes that have multiple suites. Is the interior floor area on the, retained home, the existing home where you're adding another unit, is the 71.91 existing in other multi unit dwellings in that neighborhood?
Yeah, so I've taken a walk down the block and just looked in terms of the built form of the dwellings, and noticed, of course, lots of hydrometers on some of the dwellings, which indicates that there's multiple units in some of them. And so looking at the floor plate of this house, which is existing, it's actually a little bit larger than some of the other ones on the block when you look at the air photo.
Yes.
So just based on my observations and my experience, it would be, although I don't know for sure because I don't have the exact numbers of other dwellings, but because we're dealing with 1 unit per floor essentially here, I would, I think it would be a good, assumption or opinion anyway that I would form, that the size of the dwellings are pretty consistent with what might exist in many of the other homes. It might actually be a little bit larger.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'll make the comment now with respect to the letter we received in opposition on this application, to say that it does voice concerns about issues which are outside the purview of Committee of Adjustment, concern about actual construction of the building and the construction vehicles that would be involved on a street that is already strained and stressed with respect to parking. So concern about the number of construction vehicles and vehicles of those who are working on the construction, trying to find parking in an already stressed area. So those concerns were voiced, but they are outside of our consideration of these variances. Any further questions of the applicant? Ms. Valentini?
Just in terms of the parking variances requested, especially for the house that's going to be the existing house, is there street parking?
It's yes, it's my understanding that there is available street parking in this neighborhood.
Okay, and accessible, obviously, to transit and whatnot.
Absolutely, yeah, very accessible, and of course, the transportation department comments said that they would actually support 0 parking spaces. Originally, we had proposed for the new dwelling a parking pad, but planning didn't raise concerns about that, but the transportation services said that they would rather actually have 0 parking spaces and would support that. And as you mentioned, Ms. Valentini, of course, this is a very transit accessible neighborhood.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
I just have one quick question, please. The lot that you're asking for severance for, what is the current width of that lot? And assuming you have approval for severance, what would the subsequent severed sites width be?
So the width is actually not changing because we're severing it in the middle of the lot, right? So it's existing 6.1 meters, which extends, it's a through lot right now from GORE all the way to Bellwoods. And so both lots will have that 6.1 meter width.
Thank you.
Oops, sorry. Just to follow up on that, would you characterize this as a more narrow lot? I'm just wondering why the lot size seems so much smaller. I mean, on the balance, it makes sense that I see very clearly there are very few through lots in this area. So I'm just wondering what might be driving down the lot area. Is this a narrower lot compared to others on both VALE and Elwoods?
I would say just from looking on GORE, this existing 6.1 meter is probably a bit narrower than, not all of them. Some of them seem to be that size as well. But when you look at Bellwoods, there seem to actually be more of these narrower lots on Bellwoods. So it's a little bit of a mix, particularly on the southern half of this block where there's a bit more variation, which is where the subject property is located.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then, panel. I think we can actually deal with the consent and the two minor variance applications as one motion. That would be my suggestion to panel members. And that'll just be my suggestion. Is anyone ready with a motion? Go ahead, Ms. Hayes. Ms. Hayes?
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. So having reviewed all the material that was submitted on file and looking at the lot patterns in this area and the unique characteristics of the few lots that are through lots, and the existing built form in the area, I am of the view that the severance and the related variances meet the tests under the Planning Act, both for severance and minor variance. I would be prepared to move a motion to approve the consent application, subject to the standard consent conditions as well as the development engineering conditions, and prepared to grant the minor variance applications, both of them, with the application for the conveyed lot subject to forestry condition number 3. I think I have that correct.
Very good. I think you do have that down. Is there a second?
So that would be my motion.
Thank you. Anyone ready to second that motion? It is seconded by Ms. Valentino.
I also would like to just make a comment, like I commend the agent for the planning rationale. I feel that really helped in terms of, figuring out how this fits in, especially for the severance. So I'm seconding the motion and thank you for the information. I found it helpful.
I agree.
So it is moved and seconded to approve, and this motion relates to the consent and the two related minor variance applications. So panel, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, show of hands, please. And that vote is unanimous. The motion is carried. The consent and minor variance applications are approved. And we move on to item number 40. On this application, the panel has before it materials submitted by the applicant, covering letter from the agent, previous Committee of Adjustment decisions from 2018 and 2020, which affected this property, a site-specific bylaw, which affects this property, and there is supporting material in the form of plan of condominium, shared facilities agreement, site plan approved drawings, set, submitted by Maggie Bassani, the agent. And we have commenting reports from Engineering and Construction Services on two dates, March 26th and June 29th, both from Engineering and Construction. So we'll go now and ask the agent to join us by stating your name, please.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. This is Maggie Bassani on behalf of the applicant.
Good afternoon. Okay, panel members, is a presentation required?
Chair, I don't need a full presentation, but I think it would be appropriate given the nature of the application. Although the information supplied with the application, it was very, very good. Just a short overview of the nature of the consents and the purpose as to why they're necessary, I think would be good to put on the record. Thank you.
Very good. Let's ask for that. Maggie, that's would help the panel if you could give us a short presentation in that kind of a vein. Go ahead.
Absolutely, and thank you, committee. So this is a mixed-use project. It's been fully constructed, it's occupied. As you can see from the supporting material, the residential condominium has been registered, and this was done back in March, and the final closings for the units have been done, and they're in fact actually the turnover meeting has been completed. And so that was for the residential condominium component of the project, but there are also other stratified components of the project in the form of this street-related retail. And on the color-coded R plan that I submitted, that is the area shown in yellow, that is the retail component. There is also a residential rental component shown in orange. And then there is also the third being the commercial parking garage below grade, which is shown in green. And so the consent application before the committee deals with the portions of the building that do not form part of the residential condo, being everything shown in pink. And so the application, it proposes to sever the lands into the three components, the retail, residential rental, and the commercial parking garage, each on its own individual lot. These three components are intended to be in freehold ownership, so they are not actually forming part of the condominium that has been registered. And together with the severance application, we are proposing to secure the necessary easements as between the three proposed parcels to ensure that these parcels will continue to have the necessary rights to function and operate together. Because of course, at the end of the day, this is a stratified severance, and these are all components of within the same building. So the necessary easements include those for rights for pedestrian and vehicular access, rights for maintenance and repair between the proposed parcels, rights of support, that the physical support of keeping the building together, because of course they're sharing party walls and such, as well as easements for airflow. So that all forms part of the application before you. And I will note that as part of the condominium that was registered back in March, through that process of the condominium registration, any easements that benefit or burden the residential condominium component were created through that condominium process already. And through that condominium process, there was a shared facilities agreement that was entered into and registered that will govern the future obligations of any of the components of the condo, as well as any shared facilities as between the various parcels. So that is kind of the general context and the purpose for the application. And I guess I would also just note for the committee that I am aware of the ECS conditions, the latest being the June 29th memo, which supersedes the March one. And I did have a conversation with the engineer assigned. When I reviewed the conditions, it at first was not clear to me whether condition some of these conditions were intended to deal with the condominium that's already been registered, or whether it was suggesting that the proposed parcels before you today are expected to be condominiumized. So on the screen you see in conditions 1A, B, and C, for example, require submitting copies of a declaration of condominium as a precondition. And in speaking with engineering, they had indicated that this, from their perspective, they thought they were intending to apply those conditions to the lots proposed to be severed. But I did follow up and indicate that these lots are going to be in freehold ownership, and so therefore we aren't planning to register another condominium for the retail, rental, residential, and commercial parking garages. And through ECS, they advise that that's not a problem, and in the future, should the committee decide to approve this application with these conditions, we would be able to work with ECS to clarify that some of these.
I'll ask you to make your final comment now, please.
Certainly, and so in summary, I would just note that the proposed severance is desirable and appropriate to facilitate this development as it has been approved by the city. It is fully constructed, and there are also no zoning compliance issues, since the site-specific rezoning had contemplated provision that the zoning will continue to apply notwithstanding any future severance.
Thank you.
Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Panel members, are there any questions? Ms. Valentini?
So it's just to follow up on the engineering conditions, you're fine with the wording as is, but you'll be working with engineering in terms of clearing those conditions in the future. Is that correct?
That's right, Ms. Valentini. So I did initially ask engineering if they would remove the conditions, but I don't think they are applicable anymore, given that we will have these parcels in freehold. But they indicate that they didn't have time to review and issue a new condition. So my preference would be to remove them, but I understand that we will work with ECS in the future to clear those conditions upon approval.
Just wanted to make sure when those conditions are posed, you're fine with the wording, and it sounds like you are in the latest memo.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, then, panel, we can take this application into committee for discussion if that's needed, or for a motion. Anyone ready with a motion? Ms. Valentini?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Based on the extensive information before us and the presentation that we just heard, it's my view that the severance in this case for the different components meets the tests, and that my motion would be for approval of the severance, and it'd be subject to the conditions that we just spoke of that are set out in the development engineering memo dated June 29th.
Thank you very much. Is there a second to that motion? It is seconded by Mr. Cheng. Thank you, Mr. Cheng. Okay,
Do
moved
we
and
have
se-
others? No, we don't have other standards consent conditions on this type of application. Is that correct? Or do we?
There are always standard consent
Okay,
conditions.
so
but
it's
we put
well
them in-
those.
Yeah, we put them in automatically.
Thank you.
Okay. Moved and seconded to approve. All those in favor, show of hands, please. And that vote is unanimous to approve the consent. Panel moves along to number 41. On number 41, 222 Pearson Avenue. The panel is dealing with applicant's materials as submitted, covering letter from the agent, Committee of Adjustment decisions from 2019, 3 of them which affect the property. 2 are minor variance, 1 is a consent. And we are looking also at reports from city planning and from engineering and construction. And we have one person standing by, a registered speaker? Okay, okay. I'm going to, and we have the applicant with us. Okay. So if I may, I'm going to ask I'm going to connect with the registered speaker who's listed as speaking in concern. And is Frank Tiertz there? Or,
Yes. Yes, it's speaking.
Hi there, Frank. Frank, will
Yes.
will
Good
you?
evening, good evening, sir.
Frank?
I am just concerned about the 222 Pearson Avenue, as I am living next to 224 Pearson Avenue. And this is my request to the community of adjustment regarding property at 222 Pearson Avenue. And, obviously, I live next at 224 Pearson Avenue. The old house at 222 Pearson will be demolished and replaced by 2 new ones.
Okay, Frank. Just
Yes.
a moment, please. Okay, just a moment. Hang on. And so you do. I understand you want to speak on this. So we're going to come back to you in just a moment. Just stand by and listen, because I'm going to speak now to the agent, and we're going to see what the agent can tell us to give us more information about the proposal. So just stand by, and you'll have a chance to speak in a few minutes.
Yeah.
I'm
Thank
now
you,
going to. So
Mr. Chairman.
please do stand by. Let's go now to Sean Tucci and ask Sean to join us by stating his name.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Sean Tucci. I'm the office principal at Mimar Architects, Inc. And with your permission, I will just do a quick presentation on this, the history behind this and why we're back at the committee with the same exact design that has been approved.
We'd like to understand, we understand the previous consent has lapsed, so please do that. Go ahead now.
So as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, we had this approved along with the variances related to the two houses in 2019. And there was a 1-year condition to address what the conditions of the severance was. And due to COVID, there was a 6-month lapse that the city wasn't communicating. They canceled all the deadlines. And there was no idea when things will come back at that time. And our client was under the understanding that the city will notify them when things are back to normal, and they will give them a new deadline. But the city at the same time was under assumption that the owner will do the follow-up to get the new deadline. So each party waiting for each other caused 2 days delay in meeting the deadlines. It was only 2 days by the time we realized that the city had the time and the lawyers get together. Unfortunately, they were not able to meet. And as you know, with the deadlines and the bureaucracy of what comes with these processes, even 2 days means that they couldn't do anything. So it was suggested that we come back to Committee of Adjustment. Again, it's the exact same design that has been submitted in front of the committee. Everything to the letters of the line thicknesses, everything is the same thing, because if you don't do that, then we're going to have a lot of problem on completing the conditions. And what I wanted to ask, obviously, in addition, should the committee decide to approve this application once again, I wanted to request, this was due to COVID conditions, and it was a very unfortunate event, and we want to ask, the owner has already, this unfortunate misunderstanding has cost the owner quite a bit of time waiting for resubmissions. And I wanted to ask, should the committee decide to approve the application, you do have the power to at least ease the pain a little bit for the owner by issuing a refund, approve a refund of the application fee to the owner. And should the committee decide to approve, would like to also request to have that as a condition of the approval. With that said, I would just leave answering any questions or the comments.
Well, Sean, You know, as far, the committee understands that the previous applicant consent lapsed. In a nutshell, can you explain to us, because we're looking at this, we weren't necessarily the ones who approved your original application, in a nutshell, explain to us,
Sure,
explain
Mr.
to
Chair.
us
Yeah,
the nature of the consent that you're looking for.
Sure, it's really dividing a single family home lot into two lots. And all the stakeholders are in support. We started this project in 2017, I believe, and we had lots and lots of back and forth with the planning. The goal was to really make sure that the planning is in support of the application. We also talked with neighbors both on left and right, which I do understand the number 224 is here today, but the concern is more about accessing the subject property lot to get to their backyard, which is, I mean, it was a privilege they had, but obviously the new owner doesn't have to give them that privilege. They may not, but obviously this is something that is completely out of the decision of the committee. Other than that, my understanding was that, and is still, that they are in support of the design. Their issue is mainly the access to the backyard from our client's property, which is something that obviously we can't really guarantee. That is between the two neighbors out of this committee of adjustment decision.
Well, why is this a good consent application that the committee ought to look upon favorably?
It is very much in keep. If you look at, can we go to probably the first page that shows like a site plan and a typical lot sizes? You would see this is probably one of the biggest lots in the area, and all the other lots has been either severed or they're even smaller. Like even if you stay at this site plan, you will see the number, the house and the agents to like number 220 and number 218. The lots are even smaller, Mr. Chair. So we believe this very much meets the intent of the bylaw. It very much meets the characteristic of this neighborhood, which is a smaller lots, more in dense construction, and as such, we think it meets all four tests.
Thank you very much. Your time is actually just now up. So, panel members, any questions for the applicant? I'm not hearing any. So, panel members, let's do this. We have the consent to deal with, and the applicant has also made a request for refund based on, as the explanation that he gave. So let's deal with those two things separately. We'll deal first with the actual.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I think we still need to hear from the other gentleman.
Thank you for reminding me. You're absolutely right. We do. Okay. Let us go back to the person at 224 next door, Mr. Frank Tieritz. And Frank, please come back with us now.
Allowed me to express my feeling. This is my request to the community of adjustment regarding property at 222 Pearson Avenue, M6R 1G7, Toronto. My residence is at 224 Pearson Avenue. The old house at 222 Pearson will be demolished and replaced by two new ones, 222A and 222B, respectively. What concerns me most is the new 222B one and its distance from the existing property line. By the law, it should be a minimum 91 centimeters. My request to the Committee of Adjustment is that the space of 91 centimeters permitted by the law should by all means be abided. Less than 91 centimeters will severely curtail my ability to look after my house. It will be very difficult to use ladder, clean up windows, gutters, painting, and other chores. Disability is almost certain. For an old people, wheelchair will be required to facilitate movement, providing there will be adequate space available between the two houses, my house at 224 Pearson Avenue and the new house at 222B Pearson Avenue. Safety in case of fire, lack of adequate space will impede firemen's ability to save life and property. I dare say it will be very difficult for me to accept flagrant disregard for the bylaw. Please firmly abide by the existing bylaws. Don't marginalize and conveniently ignore it, as in many cases, ladder is the culprit of severe injuries, even deaths, because it is impossible to set up the ladder at the proper angle if there is not enough space between the two houses. Please abide by the bylaw. It makes a good sense. Thank you. Respectfully, Frank Church. That's my concern. The 91 this space between the new building and the property line.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Tyrwhitt's panel members? Let's return then to the applicant. An applicant, I'll ask you to address these issues. This is raised by the next door neighbor, 224. He is expressing concern about the side yard setback between his existing property and the proposed new build on one of your two lots. Can you address that for us, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. If you look at even the same neighbor's setback is only 2 feet. So even though that the setbacks has been already approved at the committee, so it is something that the decision has been already made on it. But I do understand that we need to address the neighbor's concern. So the setback we're offering is not only more than what the neighbor already has from their property line, the same neighbor. It is also very much in keeping with what is happening in the neighborhood, which is around 2 feet, 2.5 feet, and what we're offering is only 6 inches smaller than what is permitted. Having said that, the concern that they have is about accessing somebody else's property. So the way I would translate this is that they're saying you're using my client's lots right now to move things back and forth and put ladders and whatnot, and our client doesn't have any problem with that in the future, but giving them that privilege, if you will, shouldn't really cause I guess in summary is that the client, whether this building is built there or not, whether it's built as of right or not, people don't have a right to use other people's property without their consent. So my client could put up a fence there and they're going to have no space, not just the 77 inches centimeters that they would like to offer the neighbor. So they could potentially have no space. So I think their concern is absolutely irrelevant, at least to the discussion we have. And is more related, and my client has give them the assurance that As they do the work, they can do interlocking between the houses, and they will be able to come and go, and they will be nicer and much cleaner than what it is. But obviously, they don't want to put it on title, right? As you would understand, everybody would understand that it would give a big issue to the neighbors, to my clients. So I think one is that it is very much in keeping with the character. The second is that the issue they have is not really relevant to the task we have in hand today, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Questions, panel members, for the applicant?
Yes, I'm just stating something obvious, but just to state it and to get clarification, we are simply dealing with the consent. So all of the variances in terms of the conditions set out will still remain in effect. They're tied to plans and everything like that. It's just the consent. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, you're correct, and the severance is very much in keeping with the zoning bylaw requirements for the minimum lot yard required, is also in keeping with the zoning in terms of the minimum frontage.
Okay, so that's important, and I think panel is perhaps just getting that right into our brains now, that when this originally came, it consisted of a consent plus 2 minor variance applications. Only the consent lapsed. The minor variance applications stand, but they don't have a consent to support them any longer. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Okay. So panel, further questions of the applicant, any panel members? There don't appear to be any. Let's take the application into committee for discussion, or we can move right to a motion, whatever. Ms. Hayes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This lot is a large lot. The severances being requested are not going to result in either of the lots being undersized. I think that the lotting pattern, the result of consent being authorized in this instance would not cause the creation of lots that are not common lotting pattern in the area, and it would be my view that the consent should be granted subject to the standard consent conditions and the development engineering conditions outlined in the memo to the committee.
Okay, thank you. Other thoughts, panel members?
I agree with what Ms. Hayes has just said, and I think that this meets the test for consent, and the creation or severance of the 2 lots will fit within what the current lot fabric and pattern is of the neighborhood. So I'm in support of it as well.
Thank you. Mr. Byatt?
I concur with my colleagues.
Very good.
There's no real reason to object to the consent going forward.
Okay. Mr. Chang?
Same here, no objection.
Okay, and as do I. So I look to panel for a motion, please, on the consent.
Okay, so my motion would be to approve the consent subject to the standard consent conditions and the conditions outlined in the memo from development engineering.
Is there a second to that motion?
For the reasons noted.
It is seconded by Ms. Valentini. So motion put forward and seconded to approve the consent. Those in favor, show of hands, please. That motion is carried by unanimous vote, and the consent is approved. The panel will move on now to the request for refund. We can stay in committee on this, and there's a request for refund here. If you recall, there was a 6-month lapse due COVID, and so on and so forth. So any thoughts on the refund request panel? Go ahead, Mr. Byatt.
Just a question, Mr. Chair. I'm not quite, oops, I just lost everybody.
No,
Can you hear me?
we hear you fine. Your image is frozen, but we're hearing you.
Yeah, it looks like I've blacked out, but anyway, I'm not quite sure if the question of refunds is within the purview of this committee. And I don't know if our Secretary Treasurer would be able to enlighten us on that.
So I've looked at the refund policy that is posted online, and any refunds other than, so something like this, for example, the request has to be done in writing, submitted to me, and then a decision is either made by the Secretary Treasurer or the Committee of Adjustment panel. For the record, our offices, while not open to the public, people could always reach us. We were not closed for 6 months. The declared emergency lasted 97 days, and the 1 year that they have to fulfill conditions was extended by the 97 days. So I'm not sure that what has been presented is entirely accurate.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Secretary Treasurer. That's good information for us to have. And I think having now understanding the situation a bit better, my feeling would be that that the work that has to be done internally on these applications had to be done again, and that no free refund would be due. And again, this was not presented as a written refund request, so that also colors my my thought that no refund is due. Other comments by panel?
I think I would just say that I thank you to the Deputy Secretary Treasurer for the explanation, and that the 97 days was in fact extended. Having said that, overreaching, I think that as a committee we shouldn't deal with ad hoc things outside of the policy of the city in terms of it does have a refund policy. If this, I would take it that if the city as a whole felt that if the circumstances of this unprecedented time that we've all have experienced suggested that there should be some different evaluation and some change to what was applied or how refunds may be offered, that would be forthcoming, but I would not be in support of a refund in these circumstances.
Now, we appear to have lost Mr. Byatt. Mr. Byatt, can you still speak to us, hear us?
Yes,
You
I'm
can.
frozen.
Your image
Can
is
you hear me
frozen.
though?
Your image is frozen, but we hear you fine.
Perfect.
So,
I'm in agreement with Ms. Hayes as well. I really think this is not within the jurisdiction of, there's a process. And I would recommend that our client, the applicant, go through the process, the appropriate process for refunds.
so let me understand, because we're in committee now. I want to understand. Is it your feeling that we shouldn't even be considering this? We should simply not do a motion on it either way, but rather just leave it alone.
Exactly.
And if the
Reading
applicant,
the policy, it does say a written request has to be, so I'll read it. Other refund requests, requests for partial or full refunds for a reason other than the withdrawal of an application must be made in writing to the Deputy Secretary Treasurer and will be considered, and a decision will be made by the Secretary Treasurer of Committee of Adjustment or the Committee of Adjustment panel. But we've not received a written request for consideration. But I will also comment that they had an opportunity to fulfill conditions, and even with a declared emergency, that extra time was added to their 1 year to fulfill conditions. So we were not closed for 6 months. They had opportunities to, it's not the city's responsibility to call every single applicant and say, hey, we don't normally chase them to fulfill conditions regularly. So in this case, they knew their 1 year. If they called, they would have been told you have extra 97 days.
Thank you. And I think now that I understand this a little better and I'm listening to this, I think we're even, I agree with Mr. Byatt that we shouldn't even be addressing this because this is not a duly constituted request for refund. It's a verbal received at committee. So as I think about it now, I think we're best to simply leave it alone. If the applicant wishes to make a written application, that'd be up to the applicant. I'm open to your comments on this, people.
I'm in agreement with you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other
So
thoughts?
Can we just refuse it and move on?
Well, we do need to advance here as a panel. So panel, can I take, this is not a motion, it's just,
So Barb, can I just in case I missed something, can I ask you just one more clarification? You said written and then to a committee, or written or dealt with by a committee?
They have to submit the request in writing to me, for example, and then it's sent to Michael Mizzi, the Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment, and he can delegate that to the Committee of Adjustment panel to make the decision.
Okay, so the beginning of the process has to be in writing. It's not do it in writing to the Secretary Treasurer or do it to the committee.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So then the process has not been followed then?
Correct.
So then I don't think there's a motion for us to make, Mr. Chair, on the straight reading of the policy as the Deputy Secretary Treasurer has advised us.
I agree with you.
Okay, so thank you for a great meeting, members.
I think with that, I think we are in fact at the end of the day's agenda, and I want to thank city staff for their flawless operational support of the hearing today, and as always, I want to thank the panel members for their very clear focus on matters at hand. Thank you very much. With that, the time is 6:58, and this hearing is now terminated. Good day.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, good night. Thank you, staff. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Barb.
Thank you, members.